Amanda Lee Whitmore and Greg Fallon seemed like a perfect match on paper, a glamorous Texas housewife stepping back into the dating world and a charming oil consultant with a winning smile. But one Friday night would turn a first date into a deadly mystery, leaving a quiet Sugar Land neighborhood shaken and sparking a story the nation wouldn't stop talking about. Amanda Lee Whitmore had always been the picture of Southern charm. She lived in a quiet cul-de-sac in Sugar Land, Texas, where lawns were perfectly trimmed and neighbors waved from driveways lined with SUVs. At 37, she had everything most people would envy: a large two-story home, a walk-in closet full of designer clothes, and a small white dog named Bentley who matched her manicured aesthetic. But behind the polished image was a woman trying to rebuild her life after a painful divorce. Her friends said she hid her sadness behind expensive wine and high heels, but Amanda called it self-care. She spent her days managing an online boutique and her nights scrolling through dating apps, looking for someone to make her feel seen again. After 6 months of quiet evenings and half-hearted flirting, Amanda met Greg Fallon. His profile photo showed him standing next to a private plane, smiling in a navy suit. He said he was an oil consultant recently relocated from Dallas and described himself as a gentleman with old-fashioned manners. Their first messages were polite but soon turned playful. Greg seemed to know exactly what to say to make her laugh, and Amanda admitted to her best friend that she hadn't felt butterflies like that in years. After a week of chatting, Greg suggested dinner at a local steakhouse, one of those dimly lit places with soft jazz and leather booths. Amanda hesitated at first, but agreed. She told herself it was just dinner, nothing more, nothing dangerous. On the night of the date, she took her time getting ready. She poured a glass of Chardonnay, turned on her favorite playlist, and stood before her mirror surrounded by the glow of vanity lights. She chose a silky emerald dress that hugged her waist and a pair of glittering red bottom heels she'd never worn before. As she adjusted the thin straps, she smiled at her reflection, trying to ignore the nervous flutter in her chest. Before leaving, she snapped a quick photo of her shoes and posted it to Instagram with the caption, "Stepping back into the dating world." The restaurant was lively that night, the clinking of glasses and low hum of laughter filling the air. Amanda arrived a few minutes early, ordered a glass of white wine, and waited. When Greg walked in, tall and confident, she felt an instant rush of relief. He was even more handsome than his pictures, with a calm voice and an easy smile. The dinner went smoothly. They talked about travel, family, and how unpredictable dating could be. One bottle of wine turned into 2, and by the time they finished dessert, Amanda felt warm, lightheaded, and almost happy. When Greg offered to drive her home, she didn't hesitate. They laughed during the short ride back to her neighborhood, the kind of laughter that feels effortless. Her front porch light glowed softly as they walked inside. Neighbors later said they saw the two of them standing close, smiling. Everything looked perfect, like a scene from a romantic movie. But as the night stretched on, perfection would turn into tragedy. By morning, police lights would flicker against the white stone walls of her home, and the glittering heels that once symbolized a fresh start would become evidence in a case that would shock the entire community. The morning after Amanda's date began with flashing red and blue lights reflecting off her white garage doors. By the time the sun came up, news of the incident had already started to spread around the neighborhood. Sugar Land wasn't used to crime scenes, especially not in the kind of quiet, gated community where everyone knew each other's dogs by name. The street was lined with patrol cars, and curious neighbors stood on their lawns and bathrobes, whispering as officers moved in and out of Amanda's house. Inside, the scene was cold and tense. Greg Fallon was found lying motionless at the bottom of the grand staircase, his head resting against a pool of wine and shattered glass. His once crisp white shirt was stained dark red, and one of his shoes had come off, lying a few steps above him. Amanda sat on the edge of a couch, trembling, mascara smudged under her eyes, the metallic scent of alcohol still clinging to the air. She kept repeating that it was an accident. She said Greg had been following her up the stairs when she stumbled trying to take off her heels. According to her, she reached for him to steady herself, but he lost his balance and fell. The story sounded tragic and believable enough at first, but something about the scene didn't fit. Detectives noticed broken fragments of a necklace on the stairs and fresh scratches on Greg's neck. His phone, cracked and partially soaked in spilled wine, was found halfway down the staircase. Officers photographed everything carefully. The once elegant home looked like a stage after the curtain fell, furniture pushed slightly out of place, a knocked-over candle holder, a half-empty bottle of wine on the kitchen counter. Amanda's shoes, the glittering pair she had bragged about online, were sitting neatly beside the couch. When one of the investigators picked them up, a dark smear appeared along one of the thin silver straps. They bagged them as evidence. At the station, Amanda's blood alcohol level tested over the legal limit. She swore she hadn't been that drunk, insisting she only had a few sips of wine after dinner. But witnesses from the restaurant later confirmed they had shared at least 2 full bottles before leaving. The more police reviewed surveillance footage from the restaurant and nearby cameras, the clearer the timeline became. The couple had left laughing around 10 p.m., returned to Amanda's neighborhood shortly after, and within an hour, everything went silent. Forensic experts analyzed the angle of Greg's fall and noticed bruising inconsistent with a simple tumble. It looked as if he'd been pushed or at least grabbed with force before falling backward. Amanda's account of events grew shaky under questioning. She cried, then went quiet, then blamed the shoes again. "They're cursed," she murmured to one officer. "Those heels made me lose balance." Her words became the headline that would travel faster than any fact of the case. By noon, news outlets were calling her the Tipsy Texas housewife. To the public, she was either a heartbroken woman who made a terrible mistake or a glamorous liar hiding behind diamonds and designer shoes. To the police, she was now the prime suspect in what no longer looked like an accident. Within days, Amanda Lee Whitmore's life had been transformed from quiet suburban normalcy into a whirlwind of flashing cameras, late-night phone calls, and relentless headlines. Tipsy Texas housewife blames designer shoes for date's death was splashed across online news sites, local papers, and television broadcasts. Every detail of her life, from her carefully curated social media posts to her wine glass collection, was dissected and analyzed. Viewers were captivated by the story, some expressing sympathy, others outright judgment. For many, Amanda became a symbol of luxury and recklessness, the woman whose glittering heels seemed to have played a deadly role in a tragic night. Amanda's defense attorney, Clay Morton, quickly stepped into the spotlight. He was a polished Houston lawyer known for taking high-profile cases and turning them into media spectacles. Morton painted a picture of Amanda as a victim of circumstance rather than malice. He described the red-bottom Louboutins she had worn that night as dangerous footwear when combined with alcohol and a narrow staircase. Morton even brought the shoes to a pre-trial press conference, carefully handling them with white gloves and demonstrating the impossibly sharp heel. The argument, while unusual, had a simple goal: to make the public see that Amanda's fall, literal and figurative, could have been an accident. Meanwhile, journalists began digging deeper into Amanda's past. They reported that she had recently finalized a divorce, had a small online boutique that paid the bills, and enjoyed a nightlife that was harmless but indulgent. Some outlets highlighted her social media posts, showing Amanda in silk dresses and expensive heels, raising questions about her judgment while drinking. Others tried to frame her as a lonely woman seeking love, one misstep away from disaster. The narrative was split, but every story seemed to circle back to the same question: could a pair of designer shoes really cause a man's death? Court preparations revealed more strange details. Investigators noted inconsistencies in Amanda's statements about how she and Greg had moved around the house that night. The scratches on Greg's neck, the broken wine glass, and the position of the shattered phone all hinted at a struggle rather than a simple stumble. Morton maintained the tripping heels argument in court filings, but prosecutors were beginning to push back, suggesting that something more deliberate might have occurred. Social media didn't help Amanda's image. Clips of her laughing and posing with cocktails resurfaced, with commentators speculating on her state of mind that night. Memes circulated, some sympathetic, many mocking. Curse of the Louboutins became a trending hashtag for a brief period, a darkly humorous take on the unfolding tragedy. Amanda herself largely remained silent on social media, her only statements coming through Morton, carefully scripted and focused on the accident narrative. The case had begun to take on a surreal quality. A tragic night that started as a first date had become a courtroom drama and a public spectacle. The mix of wealth, wine, and whispered secrets made it irresistible to both reporters and armchair detectives. Every detail, from the sparkling shoes to the wine-stained staircase, was scrutinized. While Amanda maintained her innocence, the combination of media-frenzy courtroom theatrics and subtle inconsistencies in her story left the public wondering whether she was an unlucky woman caught in a terrible accident or someone with darker intentions hiding behind glamour and charm. As the investigation deepened, the story began to take unexpected turns. Detectives discovered that Greg Fallon's life was not as spotless as Amanda had believed. He had previously been involved in a corporate fraud case in Dallas, a fact that surprised those who had assumed him to be a successful, trustworthy professional. While he had never been convicted, the details of the case suggested he was no stranger to high-stakes deception. Investigators also learned that Amanda's financial situation was more complicated than it appeared on the surface. Her ex-husband had recently filed claims about missing funds from their joint accounts, and late payments on credit cards painted a picture of someone juggling bills and maintaining appearances. Attention turned back to the night of the incident. Surveillance footage and witness statements established a clear timeline, but the forensic analysis added new questions. The angle and severity of Greg's fall suggested a force beyond a mere stumble. Bruises on his neck, the scattered shards of his necklace, and the shattered wine glass seemed to imply a confrontation rather than an innocent accident. Detectives examined Amanda's movements in the house and compared them to her testimony. Some details didn't align. The positions of items in the living room and on the staircase raised suspicions that the story of a simple misstep might be oversimplified. Forensic technicians also took fingerprints from key areas in the house. When they examined Greg's broken phone, they discovered Amanda's thumbprint clearly marked on the device. Inside the phone was a partially composed message to a friend that read, "She's not what she says she is," leaving investigators puzzled about what Amanda intended to convey. Was the message meant for Greg, or was it a reflection of something else entirely? The ambiguity created another layer of uncertainty. Meanwhile, police examined Amanda's spending patterns in the days leading up to the incident. There were unusual online transfers, large purchases of luxury items, and payments that didn't seem to align with her regular routine. While none of these transactions proved direct motive, the timing raised questions about whether the meeting with Greg might have been more than just a romantic encounter. Detectives began to consider the possibility that the night's events were influenced by a mix of financial tension, personal desperation, and alcohol. The neighborhood gossip intensified. Friends who had once described Amanda as careful and measured began to whisper about her behavior in the days before the incident. Some recalled minor arguments she had with Greg over text, others mentioned subtle hints of anxiety or secrecy. Every new piece of information seemed to add complexity rather than clarity. Amanda's carefully curated public image of elegance and composure contrasted sharply with the tangled web of financial stress, fractured relationships, and mysterious interactions with Greg. By the time the investigators compiled their full report, it was clear that the story was no longer a simple accident. Every element, the bruises, the broken objects, the fingerprints, the financial irregularities, and Greg's own past, suggested layers of tension and secrecy. The case had evolved into a study of human complexity, where appearances were deceiving and every detail demanded scrutiny. Amanda's narrative of a tragic stumble now faced a broader, more unsettling context, one that suggested that the sparkling heels and the romantic night might have been just the surface of a far more complicated truth. The trial began under intense media scrutiny, with cameras capturing every moment of Amanda Lee Whitmore's appearance in court. Reporters filled the gallery, each eager to witness how the story of the Tipsy Texas housewife would unfold. Prosecutors presented a carefully structured case, laying out the physical evidence alongside the inconsistencies in Amanda's statements. They highlighted the bruising on Greg Fallon's neck, the shattered wine glass, the broken necklace, and the cracked phone, arguing that the combination of these details suggested a struggle rather than a mere stumble. Witness testimony added weight to their claims, including neighbors who heard raised voices from inside the house, and forensic analysts who testified about the improbable nature of a simple fall producing the injuries observed. Clay Morton, Amanda's attorney, countered with the narrative that had dominated the media: an unfortunate accident triggered by high heels, alcohol, and an unlucky alignment of circumstances. He brought the red-bottom Louboutins into court once again, demonstrating how the thin heels could cause a loss of balance, especially on polished marble steps. Morton painted Amanda as a woman caught in a moment of misfortune, someone who had loved and laughed that night without any intention of causing harm. He urged the jury to consider the human element, to see the tragedy as just that, a tragic event rather than a deliberate act. During the proceedings, details from Amanda's past were examined closely. Her divorce, financial pressures, and social media activity were all scrutinized. But the defense emphasized context, portraying her life as one of resilience and attempts to rebuild rather than recklessness. Meanwhile, the prosecution worked to connect her financial irregularities and the mysterious text on Greg's phone to a motive, carefully suggesting that fear, stress, and a moment of panic might have contributed to the fatal outcome. The courtroom became a stage where every piece of evidence and every testimony had the power to sway perception, leaving the jury to navigate a complex story of wealth, human behavior, and unforeseen tragedy. As the trial drew to a close, the tension in the room was palpable. Both sides had presented compelling arguments, and the jury was left with a difficult decision. After 2 days of deliberation, they returned with a verdict. Amanda Lee Whitmore was guilty of manslaughter. The ruling recognized the fatal outcome of the night, but stopped short of attributing premeditation or intent. She was sentenced to 15 years in prison, a sentence that reflected both the severity of the incident and the ambiguous circumstances surrounding it. In the days following the verdict, public opinion remained divided. Some viewed Amanda as a tragic figure, a woman whose attempt at love had ended in disaster. Others saw her as a cautionary tale, a person whose indulgence in appearances and alcohol had contributed to a fatal mistake. For Amanda herself, life in prison brought reflection and a forced reckoning with the events of that night. She spoke rarely, but when she did, her words conveyed regret and a desire to be understood. She insisted she had never intended harm, that she had simply tried to navigate a precarious balance, both literally on her heels and metaphorically in her life. Years later, the story of Amanda Lee Whitmore continues to fascinate. True crime enthusiasts analyze every detail, debating whether the fall was truly accidental or the result of something deeper. The house in Sugar Land has since been sold, but local lore persists. Some residents claim that on quiet nights they can still hear the faint echo of heels on marble steps and the subtle sound of a glass shattering, a chilling reminder of the night that forever changed the lives of those involved. The case remains a study in human fragility, the thin line between tragedy and culpability, and the unpredictable consequences of a single evening that began with laughter and ended in loss.